I overanalyze a lot of the time because I think things have to be done just a certain way when I was trying to.
All right, so welcome to Desert Blockchain Monthly Meetup. It is February the 27th, 2019, and my name is Jay Carpenter, founder of Desert Blockchain, and we are at Desert Blockchain Camp, 27th Avenue in Georgia. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Global Legal Hackathon 2019 that occurred just this last weekend. And AJ was on a team that we put together, and Chad was on a team, and we had one other member, David McCarville, who's an attorney, state attorney, and basically we had a lot of fun, and we took first place, and that's all well and good, but the big thing is we want to show everybody here tonight and everybody that might be watching this why we're so excited, not only about the Global Legal Hackathon, but also about the project that we were working on and how it might apply to a number of different realms, like healthcare records, like legal records, like corporate records, all sorts of things. So anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. But before we get started, why don't we kind of go around and introduce ourselves, since we're a small group, and just say who you are, what you're interested in, and what you'd like to get out of tonight. So Chad, go ahead.
I'm Chad Eilander. I was on the blockchain team last week, and I'm kind of looking to develop that project and kind of see how we could use that and then create some kind of project to work on. I have a lot of interest in blockchain technology and IPFS.
All right, I'm Reggie. I'm a MRI tech by trade, a novice, programmer. Very interested in blockchain, IPFS, and just the future of where this technology is going. It seems like there's just so many, open endings already. So very excited about that, and just want to put myself around a group of people who think the same. We're kind of on the same page, and that's really why I'm here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Jack Miller, retired physician, interested in blockchain application to healthcare and medical records.
Cool. AJ?
I'm AJ Gilman. I'm a law student at the ASU Law School and a center scholar for the Center of Law, Science, and Innovation. Right now I'm doing law and emerging technology. So such areas as blockchain, human augmentation, genetics, privacy and big data, nano weaponry and nanotechnology, and some bioterrorism stuff as of recently. So if you have a legal question, I am not licensed to practice. I'll still be happy to talk to you.
Yeah, AJ's a wealth of knowledge and really talented. So, Eileen, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Eileen, and my passion project is called Real-Time STEAM, the science communication nonprofit. Jay is going to be one of our guests at the state capitol for State Capitol Science Cafe with legislators and their staff. And we're going to talk about blockchain, because actually that is what our sponsor is, Representative Epstein from District 9, District 18 District, from Nashville. So it's just actually providing basic information, because we're not allowed for just to kind of explain how technology works. And last year they asked us to explain 5G and how autonomous vehicles see. So yeah, so we're looking forward to this one, and it should be pretty exciting.
Cool. All right, any other questions or comments before we jump into some code? And we can kind of just, since we're a small group, we can just kind of move forward. And, Chad and I are going to show you and AJ what we built and why. It's cool.
Yeah,
So-
how was that guy? For the record, these guys are the tech people. About a month ago, if you had asked me what a Raspberry Pi is, I would have told you I prefer pecan. Not
Yeah, most people don't know, but you actually are an owner of a Raspberry Pi.
I know, Jay gave me one.
Yeah.
Good friend.
So,
I still haven't broken the cellophane of mine that I got for
Okay.
Mother's Day.
You got a Raspberry Pi for Mother's Day?
AJ, you mind coming over this way a little bit because you're the camera's
Sorry.
right there. No problem. So what I'm going to show is the article or the blog post that he basically used as our foundation for this project. And it's by a startup called Coral Health. And one of the people, I'm assuming the CTO, basically did a series of these blog posts on IPFS and blockchain and so forth. Let me pull up the other piece, and I'm actually going to run this for you. Coral Health. Oops. Let's see who's pinging me. So let me, I don't know a lot about this Coral Health, and these blog posts are about a year old, but I think very well written. The fellow who I think wrote these is from Harvard, and did a great job. And the other part that's cool about this is this is a riff on something called Naive Coin or Naive Chain. So blockchain 200. Okay, so I'll show you this in a bit, but this is the first article where they talk about how to create a blockchain, a very simple blockchain in 200 lines of Go, which is pretty cool. And if you're not familiar with Go, Go is I would consider Go the language of choice for blockchain. It's basically it was created by Google, I think around 2009 or so, and it was created by some people that came from the Unix world and AT&T and so forth, and they were looking to create kind of a no-nonsense language that it's very opinionated, but it's also designed for distributed systems. So in terms of history, in addition to these, there were like 3 core developers that got together and created this, and it's all been open sourced and everything else. It's in wide use. But back in the old Unix days in AT&T, there was something called Plan 9, and there's a lot of similarities between Plan 9 and Go. In fact, the mascot is kind of a riff off the Plan 9. Cool.
No, that's the other mouth.
Yeah.
I don't, and never heard that. Probably there.
It's supposedly a gopher, so.
Oh, I get it. Right.
And I'll just kind of bring this up. So Plan 9 from Bell Labs. And I don't know a lot about Plan 9. See, you can see the similarity in their little rabbit thing. But it was a distributed operating system, and coming from Bell Labs. The point is that this isn't a fly-by-night language, right? It has a deep history in terms of both Unix, Linux, distributed systems, and it's like a refinement of, I think, some very powerful elements. So this is the article that's you start off with, and they go into more detail, but Coral Health is basically looking to create this record management system using blockchain and using IPFS and so forth. So that's what we did is we basically took this construct with Go and with IPFS, and we put it on Raspberry Pis, and we started to exchange data and run IPFS and so forth. Reggie, have you run IPFS at all, or?
Yeah, no.
Okay. So why don't we fire up? Yeah. Are you familiar with command line yet, or anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Even the baby.
That's right now.
So let's just kind of expand this. Jack, do you code at all, or this is all?
Full Fusion years ago.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Cold Fusion.
Okay.
So this is kind of the what we have on this particular Raspberry Pi. So here's the Raspberry Pi itself. If you're not familiar with Raspberry Pis, it's basically a $35 full-blown Linux computer. You can run Windows on it. And I mean, it's 35 bucks plus a SD card, which gives it memory. And we've got like a $10 or $11 SD card on this, which gives it like 32 gigs of memory, half a gig of RAM. You know, yeah, other pretty impressive specs, but Raspberry Pis have become kind of the standard for like small board computers. And in addition to running software like this, you can also attach all sorts of sensors and lighting and Arduinos. And, you can run robots with this. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff. So, hey Stacy, pull up a chair. Welcome. You want to introduce yourself?
Stacy, nice to meet you.
Right, good to run into you again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay, no problem. So we're just kind of going over what we created at the Global Legal Hackathon and talking about IPFS, Go, and just some of the stuff that we did.
Here one.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the Global Legal Hackathon. Basically, this is the first year that it's been run at ASU. It's a global hackathon all over the world. I'm not sure how many other locations there were, but here's the key.
Jay, when you talk about hackathons,
What is that?
okay,
Yeah.
I immediately think hacking.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great point, Jack. So
Sorry about that.
the term hackathon is more like a jam session with jazz musicians. So basically, most people think of hacking as actually cracking, which is breaking into systems. But the term hacking itself is more like, hey, we're going to jump into things that we really don't know in advance, and we're going to figure it out. And it's sort of like hacking through the jungle. You know, we're going to run into problems, we're going to learn, we're going to create something new that we haven't created before. And it's literally, when it's really done right, and I think we came pretty close to this, is like riffing. It's like, you know, throw some jazz musicians on a stage and just let them go at it. So there's this kind of cool interaction that happens where you're kind of sharing ideas and sharing talents and blah, blah, blah. My greatest, well, there are two stories that I bring up about the combination of hacking and jam sessions and so forth. The greatest jazz album arguably ever was Kinda Blue by Miles Davis, which was recorded in like 3 sessions. And he just brought these incredible musicians together and gave them just a little hint of the direction to go in, and they were laying down tracks like in one take. And it's an amazing album. The other example is there was like a 17 or 18, maybe 19-year-old concert promoter in, I think, Germany, who got this jazz musician by the name of Keith Jarrett to come and do a concert. And when he got there, the concert piano was not there or hadn't been delivered. So they brought out this broken piano, and it's the largest selling solo jazz album ever. Yeah, it's called the Cone Concerts. So the point of that is that often when we have constraints or when we, don't necessarily know what we're going to do, that can open up a whole realm of creativity, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So does that answer your question about hack sessions?
Yeah, and maybe to add on a little, this legal hackathon is kind of a big deal because, as you can imagine, lawyers are able to slow to adopt technology. But especially here in Phoenix, where we have the concentration of some of the most advanced and intelligent legal technological experts, perhaps in the world.
Yeah,
Here,
true.
So having them get together and start talking about this is very important. There's a professor at ASU named Gary Marchand, who's one of the world's foremost experts on all of these topics.
Yep.
He knows just about everything about everything.
Well, and he's a highly sought after speaker around the world. They fly all over the place all the
Are you
time.
serious?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I
twice a week.
I would have thought it would have been more like Harvard that had that.
He was at Harvard.
Yeah, he didn't like it. He started at the center because no one there understood tech.
Yeah.
Although I'll say this, he's a geneticist who discovered 7 new genes, and then got bored and graduated.
Okay.
And then
Got it.
graduated from at the top of his class from Harvard Law School for the hell of it.
What's his last name?
Marchand, Marchant. I actually worked for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I met AJ through Gary Marchand. He brought you to a Desert Blockchain event and found out that AJ was doing papers on autonomous vehicles. You've done governance in virtual reality. And
I've done the storage of genomic information on blockchain. I've done the admissibility of blockchain. I've done the admissibility of AI testimony. I've done nano-weaponry and nano-terrorism.
Yeah. AJ, by the way, is 20 years old, and he's
Yes,
graduating from law school.
Wow.
And he graduated from college at 16. What, 4 degrees?
I had 4 associates when I was 15. I had 3 bachelor's degrees.
Nice.
Okay, awesome.
Ho hum.
I had sanity when I was 7.
So anyway, AJ's investigated some very cool stuff, and if you got a question, it's definitely a resource. So, but overall, what's happening is there's kind of an awakening among the legal community that they can no longer operate kind of in a silo. And governance and the law is a key part of the innovation set around this decentralized network that we poorly call blockchain, but there's a huge opportunity for innovation in governance, in policy, in how do we mesh what's emerging out of this tech and data structures with the legacy regulatory realm. And how does it fit in with jurisdiction? Because this is truly a global construct that sort of floats above the entire legacy sovereignties. Okay. It's kind of like church. It's like the Catholic Church just kind of floats above all the sovereignties or Islam or whatever, those are kind of like sovereignties into themselves, but they're borderless, if that makes sense. So anyway, any questions about that or comments? Does that bring up anything?
Sounds like I'm in the right place.
Yeah. So also, like U of A, their law school had their tech law day recently, where they're trying to bring in the tech community into the academic legal community, practitioner community. So
They're so cute.
yeah. So that's what's emerging. And in terms of conferences, there are some incredible global scope conferences at ASU. In fact, next week on the 6th, 7th, and 8th, there's the e-discovery, the Michael Larkfeld conference. And people are flying in from all over the place. There's an incredible list of speakers. And it's about how do you interface this technology with evidence in the legal realm. That makes sense.
And I'm going to guess they're going to have a lot of fruit of the poisonous tree stuff, which is a particular pain in the ass.
What do you call it?
Fruit of the poisonous tree. So the way that you guard against bad practices in obtaining evidence is a doctrine we call the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. So instead of going through legal principles, which is boring, I'll give you an example. So let's say that someone thought that I committed a crime. Let's say that the police wanting to find evidence broke into my home and held me at gunpoint and said, AJ, I will shoot you dead unless you tell me who your accomplices are and where the drugs are. And me having a gun to my face said, you should go here. They go there and they find drugs. Now, they have evidence that I did this, but something called fruit of the poisonous tree, the doctrine says basically that because they violated my rights and did something really horrible to get that evidence, all evidence that they got through their horrible acts and all evidence coming from that and so on and so forth is tainted. And the court will not let them use that against me.
No, because it's obtaining legally.
Yes, and it's a way of punishing them. That's cool. So there, from what I gather, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but there's a lot of issues with this in the context of electronic data, because if data is obtained through cracking or through some illicit method, and then it gets shuffled around the internet a whole bunch, it's really hard to trace where that data came from.
That's just who was at the keyboard when the data was entered.
Yeah. So, and there's this question of, well, at what point is it so attenuated that it's still okay? And is it ever?
Cool.
Sorry.
So, well, no, that's perfect. Because that's the cool thing about these get-togethers is we've got people from rich backgrounds and experiences, and everybody can contribute.
How will we support this project going forward? I mean, is it viable for Desert Blockchain to get behind it? Like, in other words, is there other sections we can help you with, or is this something you guys are kind of doing right? Or what is it you can?
I think we can
What would you
collaborate on this, and I mean, our core team is kind of set up now, and we're going to be going to the next round of the competition on March 15th, and we're going to be talking about it. But this is so broad and so fundamental, what we're going to show you, that it can be applied to legal records, medical records, corporate records, pretty much any kind of information. Some people use this for keeping their passwords safe, because you're basically you're pushing the responsibility to the peers for the security of the information. So what that means is, instead of me trusting my bank or my insurance company or my hospital or whatever to be the custodian on my data, this is a way where I get to control my data, which is huge, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to innovate and experiment, and we can build blockchains here, and we can play with this IPFS storage, and the GPG encryption, which we're going to show you in a minute. So all of that, basically. Does that answer your question, Stacey?
Yeah, the attorney reached out to me.
Really? Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, to me, I would tell you I just paid for my vet had put my dog out, so, yeah.
So sorry.
Thank you, so, but I wouldn't be here for this and congratulate you, so, I can let you know about that, it's my idea, if you wanted to
Sure.
talk. But the reason I mentioned, is there anything going on, is, as I'm collecting the PowerPoints that we're talking about, for the stuff I'm doing, they're in a meeting with somebody next week too, who does both AI and blockchain, and we were both talking about, when to push it on IPFS, and how to do this, so, early on, but, just wanted to quickly update you with that, to see, congratulate you and see if there's anything, just interested
Cool.
in this, because we're seeing, is there anything we can do for this?
So Stacy and Sherry are going to be doing presentations on Saturday, March the 9th, 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. around there on Solidity and Python.
Yeah, Python and AI, which is seems irrelevant, but it's now coming into blockchain way heavier, and that's actually a guy I'm meeting is talking about that, because what AI can do is it can actually, and then Solidity is a form of a smart contract for Ethereum. So, and then there was something today with the NASDAQ and moving it. So it's almost like AI starting to come in and affect smart contracts, including be able to write the contracts and modify the smart contracts. And so they're almost starting to just become more overlap than they thought, including with IPFS. So, so anyway, that's what we're all trying to do. That, so we can come here and go, okay, how does this work with IPFS? And there's a guy named Siraj. I don't know if you follow him. You do?
Yeah.
His roommate was the one who wrote IPFS.
Yep.
And he's a big, Yep, he's a big blockchain and he's data science, and he's even talking about the merging of these.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we're finding out is, how to combine this with this, and how to do the IPFS, and then how to do the AI with this as well.
Cool. So speaking of AI, the team that came in second place, computer science majors from ASU, who were demoing a site that they've actually set up, where they downloaded or they got access to the Supreme Court cases, and they started running natural language processing on the Supreme Court cases and coming up with probabilities to predict how cases might be.
Is that how they did that?
That's how they did it, yeah. So.
Yeah, the stuff that we're seeing, just so you know, the calls along with what you're saying is, one of the things you talked about with Arduinos and IPFS, like for the FDA now is just elicited for the blockchain opioid tracking. And so they're asking for bids on blockchain. And one of the things that we're all seeing is the Python component, not only to do the AI, but to do the robotic tracking along with the blockchain, and then the information is going to be encrypted and put up on IPFS. So now we're seeing all these links, and it's got to be IPFS, it's got to be the robotic tracking that comes from Python, and the data science, and then the smart contracts. So that's more where we're seeing the integration, where you have to have the IPFS on there.
Cool.
May I actually bring up a project I've been kind of mulling over that might want to work on?
Sure.
So we're talking about smart contracts. I'm going to sound really buttery, not very techy for a minute. Contracts as we know them today tend to have a lot of layers. Has anyone here actually ever sat and read the boilerplate that they signed when they agreed to any app on their iPhone?
Yep.
Okay.
Sadly enough, I took the LSATs. I almost went to hospital. So yeah.
You saved yourself from a grim fate. But I guess to put it simply, contracts have two different elements: things that happen automatically and things that happen over time. For example, you could have a contract that goes, I agree to pay you $10 and you agree to get me one large pizza with pineapple with a monster and ham. And then we could have a second clause that says, however, if you deliver that pizza not within 30 minutes, you must give me my money back. So I can imagine this being very difficult to put into a smart contract, because then you have a program that has to wait and trigger on time conditions. And now imagine layering condition upon condition upon condition upon clause upon clause upon clause, which is what we lawyers love to do. So how do you concisely put that massive block of conditions and timing and complication into a smart?
Well, you can put time locks on smart.
But it's more than that. It's more than
What
about
conditional on real world things?
Yeah.
Yeah, real world things.
Yeah, well, actually, if I'm understanding you, AJ, it starts to become self-referential,
Again, yeah.
where all of a sudden a contract down here starts to refer to a contract up here, and you get this circular looping, which becomes a problem.
Yeah. For example, I will condition getting a loan on property on condition of collateral.
That's what's going on in the blockchain with AI. That is one of the things that it's addressing. So that if you have contracts that are nested within other contracts or conditionals on contracts, this is the AI coming in. And I believe me, I'm not somebody that wants to harp AI. I'm not really pro AI. It's not that. It's just that this is coming in to answer those questions, and it's more advanced than we thought with the processing power now. So what's happening is the algorithms that were done in the 1930s didn't have the computer power, and now it does, and now it's seeing the opportunity in decentralized ledgers, because the whole point is to take away from the middleman. And so it was before, when all the people had their hands in it, and it's exactly what you said, is that now it can write the smart contracts, can the AI come in and modify these conditions where we're as people are on the peripherals of it, and that the AI is trained this way to handle that with that. And this is why we're starting to see, like, I want to say a certain number, is that you almost can't have blockchain independent of AI. AI can't be independent of blockchain anymore. They are going to, and with the IPSF, I mean that in there, where you have to have this hash table. There is not going to be no more separation.
Introduce you to the talk I just put in for at the Global Emerging Technology Conference.
Yeah, that's the other
My
thing.
talk.
That's in May. That is truly becoming
Big deal.
a big
Get
deal.
tickets.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it's really, really
what?
cool.
May?
Yeah,
And where's it?
it's at our
It's at
the
ASU.
school. It's at our school.
Yeah. It's like
Global, it's the GETS conference.
the GETS conference. Technology and science.
I'm going to pick a conversation because I disagree with you. The problem that automating too much of contracts poses increasing levels of AI is rigidity. Because, you know, people, because I've worked with lenders, people who lend money, and I worked with hard money lenders, which lend on their luck. And these people will come to you and go, our contract says I'm in default on this day. My daughter got hit by a drunk driver. She is in the hospital. I cannot pay you. If you have an AI running that contract, the AI isn't going to have sympathy.
This is some of the stuff that's being addressed. In fact, London today just announced that it's doing the first blockchain, one of the big, about basically hard money lending. It's doing lending on blockchain. It's creating it. So, and it goes to address these types of things, the human aspect. So I don't know. I just know that IPFS, what we're seeing from a technical standpoint, is how powerful this is, just moving this data back and forth, and just in general, how we're all starting to see they cannot, again, how they're applied, I don't know, but that you've got Internet of Things, you've got it running on IPFS, you've got to have encryption, you've got to have some medical records as well. I mean, it's all, but what's happening is we're noticing stuff used to move arithmetically, slower. Now it's moving geometrically, and what's happening is the AI is developing some of the blockchain technologies too fast, believe it or not, and it's accelerating. There aren't enough people to keep up. And so now you almost have to understand both to deal with. It's not just IPFS isolated or blockchain Ethereum isolated and data science. Now people are like, okay, so it's what we're finding is it's moving quicker, which is why I want to understand.
It's cross-disciplinary. It's the whole thing.
But the difference is before when it moved. Now it's moving geometrically. These computer programs can take IPFS and all neural network can just beat them. You didn't have that in the 90s. You didn't have that. a process. Um,
In the
Yeah,
80s,
you-
I didn't process things at all. I hadn't been born for about 10 years.
Well, yeah, if this is a different way that the technology is growing, because AI gives you the platform to take these, because they're already now doing AI with IPFS, and I didn't know about how to get it quicker. And I'm like, oh, so, and how powerful this hashtag is, including AI types of encryption, so the encryption you use, but how to AI to even go on IPFS, crack the hash and change it.
Mhm. Yeah, all of that is happening now, and when you can run it on a $35 computer, it's like anybody can do it, right?
And that's what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. So
Can we run AI on a Raspberry Pi? Is that enough
I
computing
think
power?
we can.
With cloud-based.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
because most of it's cloud-based now.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to have, that's the power of this. I mean, and this is why it's expanding so quickly, is people are taking these Raspberry Pis and they're putting IPFS up, and they're able to get value on here and move files on here and go to a remote, IBM, Amazon, whatever, to run the AI, and it's exploding.
It's interesting how we're moving towards the cloud-based computing, which is centralized, and IPFS, which is decentralized.
They're hybrid.
It's very strange to see.
Yeah.
We want some things together and some things apart. And it's even the same way with like legal governance too, where half of the time we're like, oh, the government's too oppressive, and the other half is like, why aren't the police here doing things?
Right.
You're like, you can't have your cake and kick it over too.
So there's a couple different threads we could go on here. And what you're talking about, Stacy, I think there's an opportunity for innovation where we start to blend the machine and the data and the logic with the human side and get something like cobots, where, there's a big, what really kind of works now is when you combine a human with robots. So the human does what the human does best, and the robots do what they do best. That's what's really taken off. So
With my radiology background, I know that, AI is going to be big when it comes to reading, images, right? And the way that I hear that they're going to attack that, of course, is, hand in hand. So they're not going to just let, the radiologists go or anything like that. That radiologists are going to work hand in hand with AI.
Mhm.
Like you're saying, because there's certain things that we do better, or that they do better than, the AI.
yeah. So that's one thing that I think we've got an opportunity to experiment with and elaborate with here. And the other thing is that's really cool in doing this collaboration with ASU Law School, Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, is that exactly what you brought up. How do we all work on this together? So how do we share participation in these projects? And by participation, how do we do credit assignment, meaning who gets credit for what they did, who gets ownership, how do we interface with the old securities laws, how do we do all that? Because this is a new realm of open source, of collaboration, and anyway, that's a whole additional topic. But AJ, I think, and David McCarville who were the two attorneys on our team, almost attorney. They got a taste of some of the fundamental dilemmas you get into in these hackathon things as to, okay, are we now an entity?
Are we a thing?
Are we a thing?
What if somebody wants to give us this thing of money? We have to call this a name now.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, guys.
But working on and innovating in these particular questions. How do you combine the logic with the humans? How do you get the humans to collaborate and create new entities that are more dynamic? All that stuff is part of what we have to work on in this realm. Any questions or comments about all that? Okay, so let's get back to the code and show you a little bit more. So this is what's called a directory. I'll open up a new tab, and let's go ahead and start a IPFS node. So IPFS. Oh, well, first of all, I'll show you the version that we're working with. So that's the version. This is the version of Go. And I won't show you Node or whatever, but just, in fact, there's a new version of, and IPFS, the reference implementation, in other words, the main version of IPFS is in Golang. So they also have a JavaScript version, but we won't get into that today. So let's go ahead and fire up a node, IPFS. IPFS, I can't even spell it.
I have a hard time seeing it sometimes too.
IPFS?
I put in like wrong
Yeah.
letters, the wrong phrase. all the time.
People transpose it all the
Yeah.
time. So this is actually starting a node, and it's showing, what IP addresses are we working on and so forth, and it's saying the daemon is ready and running, basically. So this, on this Raspberry Pi, this little thing, is a node that's now starting to talk to other nodes in the IPFS network. So,
Does it have to have permission?
no. Well, I take that back. You can set up private networks. I'm not skilled enough with this to do that, but I circulated the all hands call, which is kind of like the community call that happened last Monday. And there was one of the senior engineers from Microsoft that did about a 30-minute demonstration of how they're using IPFS with the Azure blockchain and so forth. And he was talking about the need for private node or private networks. And he was basically saying, it was so ironic because we had done this project over the weekend, and then I get on the all hands, and it was like he was talking about the same thing.
There's an application for private networks too.
Yeah, there's an application for private networks.
Get uncomfortable.
And he was also talking about how IPFS complements what they're doing with enterprise blockchain with enterprise file storage and encryption. So it's pretty powerful. So just to review, this is the daemon that's running. So now this box is talking to other IPFS.
For the record, it's Matt Damon. Okay, I know everyone is
So anyway, so that's running. Now we'll take a look at the identification information for this particular node. And this is the hash. And by hash, we mean like a fingerprint of all this mess in here. So this is the public key for this particular node. And if you run I believe this is a SHA-256 hash, you come up with this sort of like shortened identifier. And then, Chad's running are you running a node yet?
Yeah.
So you're running a node, you can start to communicate with this node, and they all start to talk together.
That's a separate own.
Yeah, so let's,
Is there a lookup directory too? Like is that part of it too, that you can look up the different nodes to know where you need to send something if you don't have the?
Yeah, I was looking at that earlier. They have like a search.
Got it. Okay.
so this is the command to start to look at all the peers that this box is talking with. And you can see all these peers.
One of those is mine, probably.
What is yours in?
It's XBL. Capital L is the last letter.
So in that short a time period,
Run.
yeah. See if we
Usually
can.
there's a search function for.
Yeah. do a find. Oh, we're in command
Red
line.
line.
Some command lines have there, don't start telling other people there.
Anyway, you can see now all these. Now also keep an eye on this, which is how hard this machine is working. You'll see it spike up to like 71%. It's because there's a whole bunch of chat going on back and forth where these things are.
What happens if it's 100?
Computer says.
Yeah.
It stops?
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I don't know either. But you can see all these different nodes from all over the world. That's what it's talking to.
I think there also is a way to search my one direct node.
Yeah, I think so too. But anyway, so any questions about all of that?
Well, when you say, again, tell me my ignorance about this, but that means these are all that are alive right now. And when you say it's talking to them, it just identifies that they're out there, correct?
You could think of it like, imagine there was a big rave going on in this space, okay, we got a big, huge party going on, and all of a sudden, Jay's meeting Stacy, meeting Reggie, meeting Jack, so as the party goes on, we meet more and more people. Does that make sense? Only this is happening at electronic speeds. So let me talk about a couple of key things before we get into the record management and encryption and all that sort of thing. First of all, one of the really cool things about IPFS is that it's, as far as we know, you cannot effectively launch a denial of service attack on it. Has been distributed denial of service attacks, where all of a sudden you get all the cameras in the world to run a little bit of code where they start pinging centralized servers. And before you know it, that centralized server is overwhelmed and crashes. Okay, or if it doesn't crash, it's just so inundated with requests that it's no longer useful. Yeah. So with all these different nodes, you effectively would have to start to DDoS each one of these nodes in order for that attack to be effective. And it becomes so fast that it's no longer viable to do a DDoS attack. That's a big, big deal. And by the way, IPFS has been banned in China. The folks at Protocol Labs, so I mean that's like one test.
You know you're on the right track.
China's like, no.
Yeah, and they haven't brought it down, as far as I know. Yeah.
That's always a good sign if China doesn't like you.
Yeah.
The other thing that they've done is when Turkey was going through its political turmoil, the Turkish government shut down the Turkish Wikipedia page, and the Protocol Labs folks recreated it using IPFS. So then there's another example, and it survived. So there's another example where you've got a state level actor that is attacking this protocol and this network and unable to defeat it. So that's a big deal. The third example is when Spain was in a conflict with, what is it, Catalonia? And I think that's still going on. There was a similar type of sort of coming to the rescue of the underdog to resurrect their data functionality on IPFS. So all of that, I think, speaks well to the anti-fragile nature of this, to use a common term.
One quick question I have about IPFS and my understanding is it's on a blockchain. In some, like essentially, to some degree, I understand it's not called a database, but for lack of a better term, for storing files, right? In China, whoever wants to deal with blockchain, because you're going to do blocks, other than putting your smart contract up on Ethereum or Ripple or wherever you do it, or you create your own coin, right? If you're moving files, you've got to move it at some point to something like IPFS, or am I missing something?
You move it to IP.
Because just store the file on IPFS. I mean, it's stored on a central server.
It's stored on your hard drive. This is the tricky part of it.
Okay.
And it's always pinging to the IPFS network. So if you turn off your computer or take your Raspberry Pi offline, and this was Jay's comment about a cold storage, is that your content is no longer pinging to the network, and so it comes off their network.
Unless somebody else has copied the file onto their computer.
So you got your initial upload, or I guess broadcasting. You broadcast it, somebody else picks it up, and then it goes on, and then they have it on their computer. It's then there. If you leave and unplug your Raspberry Pi, then your
nobody else has a copy of it.
Right. So that I got. But let's just say in general, you're home in a country, right? And let's say that somehow you want, as a country or a federal or as a healthcare system or as a finance or whatever. In other words, unless you're storing it on a central server, which you probably don't want to do if you're, I mean, there's going to be hybrid models, I know that, but I mean, like, essentially, you're probably at some point, whatever that material is, for the sake of it, you're going to want to encrypt it and break it up.
Yeah.
So isn't it at some point where these countries will be like China, if they want to play in the blockchain space? There will be, even if it's internal and it's not IPFS, they have to have something similar to IPFS, right? Because that's where you're going to be storing things if you want to break up those files. Because otherwise,
probably.
Because otherwise you're putting it on a central server. I mean, you can swap it now, but otherwise you got to either have something similar to it. Or...
Yes and no.
Okay.
There are other protocols and projects like IPFS.
But they're like it. That's what I mean. I don't mean like it.
There's something called DAT.
Okay.
There's something called Chia.
Okay.
Which is a project by Bram Cohen, who founded BitTorrent.
Okay.
So there are other projects like this, but your question isn't if everybody was using IPFS, wouldn't it be like a central server?
No. My question, the three that you mentioned, including IPFS.
DAT, Chia.
Yeah. So whatever that table is, it takes a file and distributes. It does the mechanism of IPFS, maybe not as well. Okay. Mm-hmm. That if you're on the blockchain and I've got a medical record or I've got some financial place and I'm in China.
Well, blockchain's a little bit different.
Right, but from my understanding is this is sort of acting as a database that breaks up a file and holds it. So in other words, it's a way that you're storing files.
I wouldn't characterize this as a database per se.
Well, they call it a table or a hash.
It's more like a file storage system in its
that's what I mean.
Most pure form.
Okay, but that's what I mean. In other words, it's storing data, right? It's a file. So you're storing a file, right?
It's more like taking data files and creating something that looks like this, which is like a fingerprint. Okay. And then that's called a content addressed file system. Okay. So you take the content, let's say you've got, Mary had a little lamb.
Okay.
Okay. And then you run this algorithm on it called a hashing function.
Right.
And that creates a unique identifier.
Right.
Okay. And then that unique identifier is really the part that IPFS is dealing with, the protocol of how do we handle all these identifiers and stuff.
Right. So what I'm saying though is, if you're in China, right, you have Mary had a little lamb because you're writing some sort of file on a government protocol, what the sidewalks need to be like, okay, or whatever. At some point, when you've got a file system, whether you're a Democratic or socialist or whatever, At some point, if you go to decentralized, maybe I'm not explaining this correctly, but it's like you're going to want to store that file if you don't want it on a central server. So you're going to be forced to use something like IPFS or Cheetah or the other ones. So in other words, China, by shutting off IPFS, yeah, it's not blockchain, but if I want to store that file and give it an identifier, I've got to use something similar to IPFS, if not IPFS.
I almost view it as IPFS as more of like a distribution method than a data storage.
Okay.
Yes.
But, okay. All right. So, but what I'm saying is, if you want to distribute the file, like you have something like a contract, because China has its contracts, right?
Right.
It maybe not the groups, but they have contracts. They have metaphor.
Well,
Right?
I think it still has to be in hardware somehow.
Yeah, it has to be stored somewhere, but it could be stored in multiple places.
Right. So, but they're still going to have to.
Oh, in order to actually distribute.
Yes, that's what.
Distribute
Yes,
information,
yes. So it may not be.
No, I see how you.
Yes, so I'm saying you can stop IPFS or you can stop Cheetah, but if you want to play in that arena of the distributed file, you can't just do it. You're gonna have to go to something like this.
Yeah, they would centralize it in a different manner, but yeah,
Now,
probably, but yeah, I think I understand what you're saying.
So this gives you a little bit of a sense of IPFS, and part of what we're experimenting with in the Devil Docs project is what we called our Hackathon project, is and then when you need the estate plan or whatever, you bring it out, you fire them up, put it on the IPFS network if you want to, multiple people to be accessing this, and that kind of adds an additional dimension to the power of this, if that makes sense. So you have that, let's say, extra layer of security, safety, whatever, where you know that your records are actually sitting on a box in a safe deposit box and not even not connected to any kind of network. That makes sense. So,
Can you timestamp it? Like a will, can you time, because it would still be the header of the law office and all that, right? The timestamp.
Isn't it a blockchain application?
that's the blockchain.
That's what I thought, yeah,
application.
that's what you're doing on the blockchain.
One of the ways to really get that down good, yeah.
Right,
I think
yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
something, but yeah.
Because one of the key areas that it becomes difficult in a distributed system is the timestamp. What is the true time?
Time.
Who was the first one to get it?
Yeah. Who was the first one? Because even if it's off by just a tiny bit,
What makes it different?
now all of a sudden you got a discrepancy.
Yeah, and that's probably
So-
computing with synchronization of multiple computers.
That's what I was wondering, like time,
Computer-
yeah,
I mean,
computer
this is a
time and all
nightmare
that.
problem.
But
yeah.
that's still gotta be in law, because that's what
Yeah.
e-documents and all that,
Yeah.
this
Well,
Southeast
yeah.
case law.
Yeah, and in terms of like intellectual property and stuff like that, it's first to file, basically. So anyway, any other questions about this?
I was going to show you this article from Zero Hedge about this guy. I don't even know why they were in court, but he mentioned that there's a video he wanted people to look at on Facebook, and he went home that day, and his video had been taken off his Facebook. So they had censored the video that he had on his wall. And I was reading this, and I'm like, well, that shit can't happen on IPFS.
Right.
You can't just
pull it off.
Zuck can't just be like, hey, pull that.
I gotta ask.
Pull that video.
Why does Mike Zuckerberg always look like he's really mad at somebody?
He's always stressing for it because he's hiding
Yeah,
so
well.
much dirt.
Yeah, he's got sweeping,
I would
his
say
rug,
he's-
his rug.
He's got a few balls in the air for sure.
Exactly.
So-
but that's just kind of something that you wouldn't be able to stop.
That's another interesting dimension of IPFS is the storage of video. And because through what's called a Merkle tree, or a Merkle DAG, to be more correct, you can take any length of video and identify it by one of these hashes.
Yeah, they're all the same length. Yeah.
Right.
And it'll put it into a tree of hashes underneath it.
Well, it's called a directed acyclic
Yeah, it's
graph.
some cool stuff. It's worth your time to like at least watch a video about because hopefully one day the Merkle DAG becomes like general term. Everybody.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
hoping, because can this stop pirating?
Merkle DAG.
So in terms of evidence or, authenticity of the video, that becomes really, really key. Because we had the Olympics in Brazil, and we had some of those swimmers that were at a convenience store, and they were accused of shoplifting or whatever. And there's questions about, well, is this the real video? Because it could have been altered. This is yet another dimension of the cybersecurity and the safeguarding where you have a high degree of certainty because of this hashing mechanism and so forth, that this video is the video that's unaltered. Okay.
Can you use that like for Netflix to stop pirating, or once they got down to the file, you couldn't really, it's not gonna like affect pirating?
Well, the pirating question is, I don't think you're going to stop it, and I don't think
Way worse.
yeah, I think it'll get way worse.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking is like, you and I chat on the same page. I'm like, technically, it's could make these.
No, yeah, my mind was going wild about thinking, well, if people were to actually get very good with it and use it as a primary
It's just
transmission
BitTorrent on
mechanism.
steroids, or
It's-
Napster on steroids, yeah.
Yeah, so this is often described as a combination of BitTorrent and Git, if you're familiar with GitHub and all that stuff, So anyway, anything else I should talk about?
Can you say you didn't want to share your document? Could you like get rid of one of these, or because you're sharing something with everyone that's on here, right?
That's right. So
This is perfect
did
for our project.
did I
Perfect for our project.
did I tell you to ask that question at this point?
Falling into a cleverly laid trap, sir.
That's good. Yeah.
Perfectly
Because now we're going to talk about this. Okay, so
No, the entire world sees that right now. Yeah.
so this is
Your private's not private.
this is how we first of all, there's two approaches to this that I'm aware of. Number one is you hash the file on this machine, and then you take the hashed file or excuse me, not hash, but you encrypt the file, and you take the encrypted file and create a hash of that and broadcast that out on IPFS. That is keeps your file private, basically, and that's what we're going to show you next. But the other way to do it is to have a private network of these nodes, and I'm not up to speed on that just yet. But anyway, so let's go back to our command line, and we'll go back to this. So here is a PDF of the estate planning document. So let's open this up and see. Oh, wait a second. Let's open it up with this. So this is good. So let's open with the PDF viewer. So here is our estate planning document of blah, blah, blah. This is actually 119 pages long. Okay. And we can read it and everything else. But this is what happens when we, okay, so here's the same document, but we run something called a GPG encryption algorithm. And now when we open it with the,
Not to be confused with PGP.
right.
To be confused.
Yes, to be confused with PGP.
Yeah.
Was I the first one who made that mistake, or was that David?
It's just like the dumb thing they created a.
It's not giving me a
JavaScript.
Those still confuse me.
PDF
Can
option.
someone please explain to me the
Like
big
PDF
difference?
for.
So let's cat it.
Well, you can see it if you got the cat.
JavaScript.
It'll come up all
JavaScript.
encrypted.
Yeah. So let's do a cat of this particular file, which is the encrypted file. That's Smith Estate.
CAT stands for,
View it.
To view it, yeah.
Just like open it. You just double click on it. Normally. it's
Yeah,
just
I don't know exactly what cat means,
Yeah, I
but
don't know. We used to work
anyway.
this is what I'm saying.
So yeah, so we're gonna open this file, and this is the mess that we get. So this is what it looks like, those 119 pages when it's encrypted. And
The encryption process.
but basically nobody can see what's behind this, right?
You almost need, if you really want to confuse people, you could almost do like 25 or 30 of the same file and know which one's the original file. So if people are trying to,
All decrypt multiple.
yeah, we did that all the time.
Yeah, but in this case, you wouldn't have to do that because you know it is. They couldn't view it unless they had. Because this was encrypted with the recipient. So in this case,
Public key.
Yeah, public key.
So-
I'm the only person who could ever view it. So when you upload it, I'm the only person who could actually.
Right at this point,
Yeah.
but if it did, you could always do layers of the files to be like, kind of like decoys.
Yeah, because that's the part we didn't explain because it's.
But yeah, you're saying on
confusing,
yours
but-
right now, it's gonna be open only on by your key and your key.
Yeah, because I'm the
Yeah.
only one who is encrypted with my public key. And I only had a key with my public key, yeah.
So this is kind of like the mothership, Will, where the estate planning document, let's say, was created and stored in its unencrypted file or format or version. But we want to now share that Smith document. We want to share this with Chad's computer and not with this computer, which also is running IPFS. And I'll show you that in a minute. So how do we do that? Well, what we do is we do something called a GPG encryption using the public key for this that's on this machine. And when we do that, we get all that gobbledygook. But when Chad pulls down that hash on his machine running an IPFS node, he can actually recreate this, but he's the only one who can recreate it.
So you've got to know his,
He has to know his private key, sort of like his password, in order to decrypt that gobbledygook. But the only reason he can decrypt it is because we've used his public key. So you can think of this like your bank account, when you go online to get your banking information, you've got basically your account name or whatever, and then you've got your password. What we did is we created all that gobbledygook just with his account name. We don't know his secret key, his private key. Only he knows it. But because we did all that scrambling with his account name, effectively, and then he can pull it down off from IPFS, he can decrypt it and recreate this.
Yeah, I think this is the one that we used as the one that I pulled down. Then when I viewed, so when you view it, it still goes like this. That's what it looks like. But you actually have to do a formal decrypt on this machine. And that, I have that command. So the GPG decrypt.
And how did you obtain his public key? It's just out there already?
He could broadcast that to anybody and everybody. And I'm going to show you how we're going to propose using the blockchain the communication of the public key. So
Yeah, so this is actually the GPG command you use to actually decrypt the file, and then it asks you to name the file. And this I just did it in test in PDF, and so when you run that, I don't want to run it right now, but when you do run that, you're able to then get the file as a test PDF. It just downloads right there. Open that file from here, so that I can get
with the PDF viewer.
a PDF viewer.
Yeah. You want to go ahead and do that just to
take a while.
complete the circle?
No, it should open it. Or actually,
Yep. So there it is. Same thing.
It's freaking brilliant. It's freaking brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really brilliant, and it's the right
and
application.
PGP has cool things that we're discussing.
GPG or
PGP? The one that we use.
GPG.
GPG. So you can do time locks for a certain amount of time that the encryption
Okay.
works.
You can also do revocation.
That are separate.
So I'm interested to hear how you're going to use the blockchain for the public key.
I'll show you that in a minute. But
Yeah, I mean, this is just brilliant.
so the other cool thing that we haven't gotten to yet, but is part of the DevilDocs project, is having the necessity for what's called multi-signature. So would they take like 2 out of 3 of us, any 2 out of 3 of us, to decrypt the file,
Safety deposit box or something.
like a safety deposit.
So this is my entire medical history,
Yes,
and I want to send it to my new doctor.
right.
You could do that same.
Same thing.
Then the new doctor could add a progress note,
Right.
re-encrypt it.
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah. Now, the fellow from Microsoft brought up he said this doesn't really scale because it gets pretty complex pretty fast in terms of whose public key are we using, what's the private keys, all that stuff. So we got to experiment with that. In the estate planning realm, where you're not constantly accessing these documents
Once every couple of years.
it's probably going to be okay, but we're going to have to look into private networks to really do this, where you've got something more dynamic, like supply chain.
All the time.
Yeah.
Not to do this, but they literally, when I was researching the blockchain, and like that's one of the things we're addressing, is the private, and also how to compress that with the AI. You could go to a private network and have the AI be able to compress these files down more and be able to send them dynamically.
Mm-hmm. But this is a radically different approach to document management from a centralized perimeter, hardened perimeter approach. So
Smoke the competition. There's nothing like this.
yeah, and it really pushes the control to us versus our healthcare provider or insurance provider or whatever. And those people really shouldn't want to be in the data management custodian business anyway, because it's a big liability. I mean, Banner Health had 3.5 million patient records hacked. That's a big problem, right?
Just phishing too, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is what the amazing thing is you're literally addressing now that hackers have the power to crack something central, right? Which they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is your answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's huge. That's not making anybody wrong or right. It's simply addressing a problem in a litigious, not trying to be pun here, world and in the healthcare. I mean, it's just,
Yep.
I mean, even, you know what, if I want to play devil's advocate, this is just my thought. Let's just say that, you know what, Banner Health, you didn't even want to challenge it. You didn't want to challenge a law firm, right? The date is this. But you know what? If they got a denial of service attack that went down, but you had your own records, you could send it straight to your medical doctor. So let's say they never changed a thing. You could make so much money as this is your storage, as the alternative, without even trying going after established
the
systems.
alternative storage is a variable that I often think about for just holding your own personal records.
Use case, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just
huge.
think about that. It's huge. It's huge.
Because I know most people don't want to, but I would love to have that kind of control over my own.
Do you know what? You don't need to convince somebody because Amex getting hacked. I mean, all these people getting hacked is doing it for you. I mean, no offense,
No,
but he
I
just
know,
said Banner Health. I mean, you've got the best PR in the world.
Yes.
It's going to give you let them continue to get hacked. Let it go up. With London, it's hospital just had to pay like 2 million or 3, where they went after the hospitals recently in London, and they
For the ransomware?
Yep, the ransomware. Yeah, and all the law firms. So,
Well, those are big companies too, where it's like most of the law firms don't have complex data security. Not that it works like a lot of mom and pop shops. Like, they don't have advanced anything.
But think about that. You're going in, and all of a sudden your doctor can't get it, but he still can run the machine. So you can go with your own record, and you can get your chemotherapy that day. You can get, it's.
That is one of the biggest issues we come across, especially being an MRI tech. People have these implants and they don't have a card. There's no way to really identify it because they had that put in at some hospital in Wisconsin somewhere.
It would be nice to have your own data for that. Right?
Yep.
You mentioned, Jay, last time you mentioned Coral Health, so I went to the research on it. They have something like this for medical records that they're sharing with certain hospitals now.
Yeah.
I was interested in Mayo. They do not share it with Mayo, but you can download it to your phone or whatever.
Your own records?
Yeah, and then
It's
blockchain.
Yeah.
But I don't know I'm not technical enough to know how it's different than what you've got here.
Yeah, I don't know either. I suspect there's definitely overlap and, other people are working on this. Actually, some alternative projects and initiatives surfaced from us hacking on this over the weekend. So we've got to look at that as well. But what I'm excited about is making this hardware centric.
Yep.
And then setting up a whole service set around assisting law firms and lawyers and insurance people and accountants and all that sort of thing. How do you network all that stuff together, and how can you do it with hardware that can actually be turned off and distributed with?
Well, that's brilliant. Just if you did it as an alternative backup for your clients, I mean, if this is your project or whatever, all you have to do is like, and I'll sign a non-disclosure. I don't care. I mean, I have no problem doing that. But I mean, if the amount of these being so inexpensive, you could sit there and just with open source and just create a factory out of here where you're just mailing it in and just virtually even installing the Go on their machines or however are on there, just one for Go, and if it goes down, and one for the SD cards. I mean, you can make a fortune doing that without them having to change a thing.
Yeah. We'll see.
It's a smart business these days.
How is it? Like it cannot be decrypted at all by anyone else?
Well,
that one file that was set up because it was set up for me to only access. It takes a little bit of time. But.
So usually, I mean, the robustness of the GPG is at a state level actor level of robustness. So if you can crack GPG,
there's a huge problem.
There's a
lot of people.
We're in big trouble.
Yeah.
What's more likely to happen? I mean, you're probably your biggest vulnerability is losing or corrupting your private keys, your password, because there is no customer service number for GPG.
Well, who's the guy that died with his 135 million?
Yeah, that was like Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. Yeah. So anyway,
It's lost.
guys, I'm going to show you blockchain using Go if you're interested. So anyway. So all that's IPFS, GPG encryption. How do you take a file like this, encrypt it, load it onto IPFS, run it on Raspberry Pis and everything else. So this machine has the 200 lines of blockchain in Go loaded on it. So I'm going to fire that up and show you how that works. So we CD into the Go. Let's see.
Yeah, no. Well, they would be the tree and how it's organized behind. I think that it's they call it a Git life. But yeah.
It's not on that. It's on this one, I'm pretty sure. Better on the bigger screen.
But one of the implementations that we're on right. Version control similar to it. It's like there's 5 layers of IPFS. That's one of the ones. Which is kind of another cool part of IPFS. It's in progress. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I was digging a little deeper this week after learning and practicing over the weekend. There's a lot more to this project than I. But I mean by layers, like just layers set up for distribution. So each of them have different colors you on it after the Joker from Batman. He had a different team. That's just great. And so like that Git layer is version control.
Look what?
I said I love how we modeled the color scheme here after the Joker from Batman. It's kind of green and purple. Where's the Riddler? I'm losing track.
What have I found up?
So this is more layers to it then.
More layers to it than a wedding cake. Oh, I get it. Yeah, and they also have the JavaScript implementation. Because right now there's not an easy way to get it over, like say create a website and link to IPFS.
That's what I was hearing.
There's a JavaScript implementation. It's not they don't care about it, it's just they don't care about it right now. Because that will be built in but the other project is similar.
Oh, here
you can actually build a website today.
It is on this one.
More challenging here. You've got
Okay.
no command line actually.
I just
Do all this hard work in order to actually use it. So eventually they'll get there to where you can port directly over from a HTTP website over onto their
good.
content directed.
Makes sense.
Because there is no traditional
So-
GET request here. It's totally different.
This is an instance of so this article or this blog post is loaded, the code is loaded on this machine. And I'm going to do go run main. And voila, there's our Genesis block, where it is showing 0 beats per minute. It basically does heartbeats, and this is the index 0, so it's our Genesis, and it's got a time stamped, and then this is the hash. So this is basically the server listening on port 8080. So if we go to, open this up, a web browser, go to HTTP, localhost 8080, and voila, there's the same block basically. So now, go back here, we open a new tab, history. Chat showed me how to do.
Oh, it's
It's a
nice.
handy command. And okay.
I think you also just put the number here on the line.
Yeah. So here's the curl command that I was playing around with. This is a bunch of gobbledygook for how do you put information into the blockchain. So let's copy that. Go down here. And if I paste this in, and I'll change it just to show you I didn't pre-program this. Oops. Let's do 5, 0. So 55 beats per minute. Hit enter. Voila, this is our second block. And now it's showing 55 beats per minute with this hash. And if we go back to our, this is basically the server that's running the blockchain. You'll see that it's got the index 1, 55 beats per minute. Here's our block 0, Genesis block. And now if we go over here to localhost and hit refresh, bingo, the second block shows up. So this is a very, very simple blockchain, but what's proposed is that we start putting the hash of the file, that IPFS hash, in where it says BPM. Instead of BPM, we put in the hash of that file or the hash of that content on IPFS. And now all of a sudden, we've got this source of truth regarding the IPFS hash that can be communicated via the blockchain. So that opens up a whole bunch of possibilities.
But wasn't it doing that before?
It wasn't doing it before. Well, the advantage of this, if you do it on the blockchain, and we're talking about turning the Raspberry Pis off,
Okay.
you've got this source of truth that this hash existed and was on IPFS at some given point in time. And because it's an immutable record and hash, you're not going to be able to tamper with that. So even though you can't find it out in the IPFS swarm, you know that hash was on the IPFS network at some point in time. Does that make sense?
Yes, and if I understand this, when you say blockchain, this is me just trying to straighten this stuff out. So IPFS is on the blockchain, right?
No.
No, IPFS, okay, so what it
I
says it's going.
got a great visual for you because I had this same problem finding it.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, darn it, I mean, when you say blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain or the blockchain in general, or which blockchain?
No. It could be the Ethereum blockchain, but we're proposing a completely new blockchain that's
Thank you, that's,
independent.
okay,
Yeah.
that's what I needed from you, because you're like, I just put on the blockchain, like, which one, Ripple?
No.
Or
Okay.
this would be Go. But the example in the Medium article, I'll see if I can find it, is they use Quantum, which IPFS is a separate blockchain that has its own API separate from all of your services for IPFS.
So this is what we're saying too, so
And
this is
they
IPFS.
would be porting because you'd be creating a reference from your IPFS hash on the blockchain.
Now, is this Go, I mean, the one that you're talking about, the new blockchain, is that you're developing or IPFS?
Well, this is the one that this example can go. The one on the Medium article that I'll show you from my computer, their example is they use Quantum, and they use also Ethereum's virtual machine.
Okay.
On top of that, to develop a smart contract that does the implementation in the blockchain.
But you guys' theory is to create your own.
Yeah, you don't have to use Quantum, you could use Go or some other type of blockchain.
Yeah,
there's lots of things to look at what to use, but.
Okay, so at least I'm not lost. I was
No,
like,
yeah,
all right.
that's
So
a very hard question.
we're at 8:29 right now. I'm going to wrap it up for the recording, and continue to talk about this, whatever. But that's pretty much what I wanted to cover tonight. And yeah, so anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody.
I'll show you this picture. I got it on my computer over here.
Our next Desert Blockchain event will be hopefully here on the last Wednesday of the month in March. And we don't have a topic yet, but stay tuned. Have a good night.